Chapter 6, Monday, March 26th, 1984. The slow lunch line couldn't have been more pleasurable. Tina Barnes' hair brushed over a sweater that looked as soft as mist, and Donnie wanted to touch it. He let the movement in the line press him forward enough for his arm to brush against hers. "Sorry," he said. She smiled. "That's okay." His throat went dry, and through a storm in his head, he tried to grasp something else to say. A poster on the wall advertised an essay contest. Should Magna incorporate? The winner would get free tickets to the Gem Theater, a free pizza at the pizza stop, a $50 savings bond from the First Security Bank courtesy of the council, and a chance to ride in the Magna 4th of July parade. "Are you joining the contest?" He winced. He should have asked what kind of music she liked. "What contest?" she asked. She didn't seem annoyed. He nodded toward the poster. "That one." She shrugged. "I didn't know anything about it." Yeah, me neither." Seconds went by as he tried to think of something else to say. He imagined asking her what she was doing this weekend. Could this be the right moment to ask her on a date? He would need money and a way to get her to what? A dinner? A movie? They could take the bus together. He was about to speak when her friends burst into conversation. "That is so freaky. She's such a slut," one girl said. "She knows he has a girlfriend," Tina said back. Her attention went 1,000 miles away. She took a salad and disappeared into the crowd. Donnie, left behind, took a tray of mashed potatoes, meat, gravy, green beans, a roll, and a little carton of milk. A dork dinner. The sports crowd had taken over the table he normally sat at, so he wandered until he saw Tina again. She was well insulated by friends, but the table behind her wasn't filled. When he arrived, he saw the reason why. Someone had shaken up a can of Coke and sprayed it all over the benches. The next empty table sat in a lonely place in the corner of the room. Still looking around, he saw Chad and his friends by the pop machines. Donnie quickly took the lonely table. As he ate, he watched Tina. Her delicate hand worked on the salad, lifting bites between laughs and conversations. Sometimes she would turn enough for him to see the side of her face, her skin so smooth and touchable. The loose sweater hid her breasts until she moved just right. Another conversation from a different table drifted his direction. Someone had said the retard girl had run off and was missing. Kendra Farnsworth promptly corrected her. "Nancy Nash is her name, and she's my friend." Interested, Donnie scooted closer. "The police were at her house last night. A bunch of people from our ward already got together and searched the fields. They're organizing a bigger group today. My dad took work off to go help," Kendra said. "What if she got kidnapped?" Jenny Stewart asked. "I heard she was last seen by the park. Weird people hang out down there all the time. That's why I was crying. I'm so worried about her. We were best friends for so long," Kendra said. Tina's bunch left their table. They moved through the crowd, then merged with Chad's group at the pop machines. She smiled at Chad, a welcoming conversational smile. Donnie looked down at his half-eaten mashed potatoes and gravy and lost his appetite. "So, what happened to her? I mean, she was normal and everything," Jenny asked. Kendra, holding a pop and working on a bag of chips at the same time, lowered her voice. "Her mom says it's a degenerative disease. But there was this one time back in the 7th grade. We went and hung out on the playground down at Webster. She found a hole in the fence that led to the flumes. We went in and found a pond and everything. She said she had to pee, so she walked down the trail and didn't come back. I looked for her a long time. I was scared. I waited as long as I could, then went to find help. When I got through the fence to the playground, she was sitting on a swing as if nothing had happened. I was so mad I cried. That's when I first noticed her sickness, I guess. One day before things got bad, she said something really weird. Remember that day at the flumes?" I said, "Yeah. I'm still pissed." She said, "I discovered something amazing." That was the last thing she spoke of before she stopped talking. Weird, huh? Jenny took a drink of pop, tipping the can back, then sending it gently down empty. "I guess." Kendra shrugged and finished off her chips. Not wanting to look at Tina anymore, and at the same time wishing she would smile at him the way she smiled at Chad, Donnie picked up his tray to return it to the lunch ladies. The busyness of the kitchen sounded industrial over the kid chatter. Passing Kendra, he paused. "I'm sorry to hear about Nancy." She looked up, surprised, but not angry he'd been eavesdropping. "Yeah, me too. Did you know her?" "I guess my mom knows her mom," Donnie said. "I only met her once." Kendra nodded. Her friends acted uninterested. "What are the flues?" Donnie asked. "You mean the flumes. It's wastewater from Kennecott. It's kind of a cool place with a big man-made waterfall and a big pond and a canal. You're not supposed to trespass, but people do it anyway." Jenny said, "I heard high school kids go drink beer and skinny dip there." That seemed to cure the boredom at the table. "Oh my gosh," another girl said. "I heard people have been caught having sex there." "Gross." Everyone laughed except Donnie. Kendra shook her head and rolled her eyes. Separating herself from the others, she walked with Donnie to the return counter. She lowered her voice. "Why do you ask about the flumes?" Donnie shrugged. "I don't know. It looks like a cool place. I want to go check it out." He thought her face had subtly changed. Not that she had a grand smile and lost it, but maybe it was the look in her eyes and the tone of her voice. "It's probably best you stay away from there. I mean, I wouldn't go if I was you. I wouldn't go back if somebody dragged me." "Why not?" Kendra threw away her garbage, then folded her arms. After seeming to search for the right words, she said, "There are no trespassing signs all over those hills. Heed them, and you'll be happy for life. See you in class." She patted his arm and walked away. Donnie laughed. He wanted to tell her how much she sounded like an adult, but she'd already joined the throngs heading out the door. As he scraped his food into a garbage can, he became aware of the janitor, who stood next to the return counter and seemed to be looking at him. Donnie sat the tray down extra carefully. He felt uncomfortable, as if the janitor thought he'd done something wrong. Keeping an eye out for Chad and his buddies, he joined the crowd, leaving the lunchroom. Chapter 7, Thursday, March 29th, 1984. "I'd like to point out," B.J. Holt said into the microphone, "in the first fiscal year, 80 to 81, West Valley City's budget was a little over $4,700,000, not $4 million, as Oliver insists. That was nearly $5 million. I'd like to also point out—" Oliver interrupted. "I'm not insisting on any number. I wanted to emphasize how dramatic the jump in Texas was in the last 3 years. But you're doing the job for me, so just keep going." He waved his hand at Norm as if shooing a fly. B.J. shook his head, accompanied by sparse laughs from around the crowded auditorium. A camera flashed. "Thank you for the clarification. Last year's budget had jumped to $14,084,000. Yes, that was a 196% increase in 3 years, but that doesn't tell the whole story." He lifted a wooden teacher's pointer and turned to a large graph on an easel. "You can see on the graph I prepared the projected numbers for the years 85 through 88. The numbers level off and yet still account for projected growth in municipal needs. The projected growth, both residential and commercial, more than eases the tax burden. Taxes actually begin to drop at a certain point, barring government waste and extravagance." "I'm sure you got that off your crystal ball last night," Oliver said. He leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. More laughs from the public audience. More camera flashes. B.J. briefly entertained in his mind several possible ways of violently wiping the smirk off Oliver's face. His hand tightened on the pointer. Chap Breeze struck his table with a wooden mallet. "Please, no more interruptions. There'll be plenty of time for constructive comments after Mr. Holz's presentation." Oliver lifted the palms of his hands as if to capitulate. B.J. steadied his voice and smiled. "We're all aware of the cost of providing city services. It's a reality every city deals with, either with fiscal responsibility or by incurring government growth and debt. Let's not forget we stand to become geographically the largest city in the state of Utah. The potential for growth, both industrial and residential, speaks for itself. We're looking to the future here, not the present or the past. We have the chance to do this right from the beginning. We can determine for ourselves what kind of city we'll become in spite of the tired argument that our taxes will go up. If we fail to act now, our community will slowly die on the vine. We'll continue to be an unproductive municipal liability to a county whose seat and power are on the other side of the valley." The crowd in the room divided itself into boos and a standing ovation. Rosa Jean raised both her hands in a matronly fashion and smiled endearingly at the crowd. BJ gritted his teeth and felt the indigestion rise in his stomach. If they could only see her when she's not in front of the public, he thought. May I add to what I had already said before Mr. Holz's comments, which we duly appreciate? We are, after all, a democracy, aren't we? A representative republic, Norm Sutton said into his microphone. Rosa Jean's eyelids drooped behind her glasses. Andrea Delfini rolled her eyes and seemed to find something more interesting to look at on the ceiling. Rosa Jean cleared her throat. "Please," Chap said, lifting the gavel again. "Let's stick to the agenda, shall we?" "I would just like to remind everyone," Rosa Jean said. "Following Mr. Holtz's vision wouldn't be difficult, considering the absence of an economy of scale large enough to support the new city government, should there be a downturn in the aerospace or copper industries, which we are beginning to see with falling world copper prices. We could impose massive franchise taxes on utilities on top of property taxes. One way or another, someone has to foot the bill for BJ's brave new city. It would have to be the little guy. We've already discussed this. That question was well answered in the future projections for a business-friendly environment and cannot be based on the current county-run environment that keeps our economy depressed. Now, please, let's move forward instead of going in circles." We have the announcement of the essay contest winner. Several wonderful essays were submitted, and we'd love to give an honorable mention and thank you to all participants. We'll turn the time over to council member and local high school teacher Andrea Delfini. Sitting several rows back from the stage in the Brockbank Auditorium, Jenny Stewart watched the council meeting and vibrated with excitement. She'd spent weeks researching the incorporation question. She'd interviewed local business owners, West Valley City officials who'd been directly involved with their incorporation, including the mayor, plus some county officials who were in opposition. She'd consulted the head of the English department at Cypress High School on all her drafts. She'd even talked to local historians and stayed up, burning the midnight oil on several occasions after all her other homework was finished to perfect something her mother, who'd been an English major in college, said was already perfect. She'd titled it, "The City of Pleasant Green, A New Future." When Ellis Hardman, the PTA president and head of the essay panel, had sent congratulations that Jenny had won and that she should have 10 copies made and be prepared to read her essay at the council meeting, Jenny had taken some of her savings and bought some high-quality typing paper and spent one more long night typing her essay to perfection so it would look professional when she presented it in person. She went so far as to have copies professionally made and bound with covers and fancy title pages. Flanked by her mother and father, whom she knew people looked to as pillars of the community, she proudly held the stack in her hands, feeling herself to be a part of history. Stepping away from her place at the table and approaching the podium, Delfini said, "It wouldn't be too much trouble if we removed this propaganda piece, would it?" She proceeded to flip the large paper sitting on the easel to cover the graph BJ had placed next to the podium. "I'd thank you to leave it," BJ said. "It was part of my presentation." "It's part of the overall presentation," Chap said. "Which is over," Delfini said, scooting the easel off stage right. BJ began to stand, and Norm Sutton, a good friend of Jenny Stewart's father, gripped him by the arm. A small applause broke out among a group of people surrounding some union and county who's who. The campaign manager for the local Democratic House of Representatives was among them. An eruption of boos followed. Jenny noticed a policeman in a dark corner shifting his belt. Delfini wiped her hands as if she'd touched something dirty. Jenny's dad shifted in his seat and leaned forward. "I'd like to say it's a grand honor to announce the winner of the essay contest. We have such a promising group of civically minded students that I can say choosing a winner was a difficult process for everyone on the panel. Each essay was carefully read and considered for both presentation and content. It's my pleasure to award a shining young freshman, and may I add, one of my own students." Jenny balanced her stack of essays and began to stand. Her mother smiled warmly, which already caused her to feel like tearing up. She promised herself she wouldn't blubber. "Chantal Dement." Applause erupted among the Dement supporters. Rosa Jean Dement and Oliver Weissman both stood up from their table on the stage as Chantal jogged up the stairs and glided to her mother, who stepped away from the council to give her a hug. Then she glided to Delphine, who did the same. A look of confusion fell over the rest of the council members. "What is going on here?" Jenny's mother asked under her breath. When the applause died down, several council members put hands over their microphones and whispered to each other. Jenny, feeling as if she'd been slapped, collapsed into her chair. The room began to spin around her. As Delphine stepped aside, and Chantal, who carried papers of her own, positioned herself behind the podium, Chap said, "We have a different list of—" Delphine quickly leaned into the microphone. "The PTA president had sent in a preliminary list of runners-up, but since she had to prematurely relinquish her position to me due to her maternity reasons and due to some entries which came in during her absence, we felt the contest deserved a second vote to make it more fair and updated." None of those lists were final. "We had a winner," Gordy Rushton said. Chantal's smile faded slightly. As if not knowing what she should do next, she looked at Delphine, who said, "A final decision was made, and we have our winner." She clapped and stepped away from Chantal, who regained her look of confidence. "Thank you so much. This is such an honor. My essay is titled Historical Reasons Why Magna Should Not Incorporate." Another applause from the Dement supporters. The essays in Jenny's hands seemed to erase themselves. The people on the stage became a swimming blur. A sharp sob escaped her mouth. She stood up, dropping her stack of essays onto the floor, covered her mouth with her hand, and ran up the aisle, through the cold and fluorescent-lighted hall, and out the door into the frosty night. Her feet scraped over humid cement, making echoing noises, lonely things against the streetlights in the darkened neighborhood. She heard her mom call from the school steps, "Jenny, honey?" Her house was miles away, on the east end of town near the boundary with West Valley City. Cold or no cold, all she wanted to do was run her shame away. She passed 4 silhouettes, one taller than the rest, that stood by the ball diamond. Tiny glowing ends of cigarettes floated in the air near their featureless heads. She was vaguely aware of one of them, the shortest. Could it be that perv, Greg Hunt? As he tossed away his cigarette and began to walk through the darkness, diagonally across the schoolyard in her direction. The other silhouettes began to follow, until her mother, who yelled from the end of the block, "Jenny, come back, sweetheart. We're leaving. Dad's gone to get the car." The silhouettes, just out of reach of the yellow streetlight, turned away and disappeared into the darkness of the ball field. Chapter 8, Wednesday, April 4th, 1984. The snow was gone. Spring flowers bloomed in the warming sun. Jenny Stewart should have been happy. A stack of undistributed essays sat in her closet, buried behind boxes of old clothes her mom intended to pass to her sisters as hand-me-downs once they grew into them. Hand-me-downs from Jenny's older sister Monica. What her mom didn't seem to know was how out of style they'd be. But there was no convincing her. Monica had suffered the bell-bottom horrors when she entered junior high. Mom had actually made her go an entire day wearing clothes from the 70s. For some crazy reason, Mom had thought it would be cute if her daughter wore clothes Mom hadn't been able to fit into for a decade. Monica came home traumatized and refused to ever leave the house again if Mom didn't take her shopping for at least one modern pair of pants. By high school, Monica had gotten wise and gotten a job. Jenny seethed at the child labor laws and could only watch her sister with acute jealousy as she drove around and shopped at the malls with impunity. She had to admit, though, that Monica had been generous from time to time, offering to buy Jenny a new outfit when there was no other hope. She leaned her head against the car window and refused to look at businesses that passed. But in her mind, she kept a growing list of places where she would submit job applications the moment she turned 16. When a burger joint disappeared behind her, she had to peek a little. She thought again about the essay contest. It stayed in her stomach like swallowed glass. The contest had been rigged, and she had no way of proving it. Her parents were sure, but they insisted there wasn't anything they could do beyond submitting a complaint to the council, the very people who had fixed the contest. Dad said it was the last straw, and that was why he was looking for property to buy in West Valley City. He had a feeling the vote for incorporation would be just as rigged, if not heavily influenced by the propaganda by the pro-county, pro-Demint camp. He wasn't threatening to quit the Chamber of Commerce and completely close up shop, move his business off Main Street and right out of the county. He was promising and preparing to make good on that promise. The late afternoon sun hinted of summer, and she rolled down her window. Radio news made her bored and sleepy. Nothing but stories that managed to stain anything good President Reagan was trying to do. The media even seemed to make him look bad as he called for an international ban on chemical weapons. How could he be a bumbling president and call for a ban on chemical weapons? The announcer's tone disgusted her. Cool air contrasted with sun warmth. She closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, the image of the greening Ochre Mountains, yet still snow-covered in some places. A beautiful vision. The name Ochre, supposedly meaning wooded mountains, was a Goshute word. What she'd heard from her grandparents, who actually grew up among the older generations, was that the word meant shining mountains, something she'd written about in a Utah history report in the 7th grade, a report that received a shining A+. Legends of the mountains being a sacred place came to mind. Her grandpa told her a story about an Indian who'd been pursued by other Indians all the way from the northern part of the Utah Territory. The poor man made it to a rancher's camp and told his story. The reason his pursuers let him go was because it was bad luck to kill anyone in the sacred ochres. Whether she remembered the story correctly or not didn't matter. It gave the mountains a romantic mystique. The sun brightened ridges cast heavy shadows over Coons Canyon and Hog's Back. The little northern peak, Theed's Peak, with the cypress sea painted on it, stood out. She thought she'd like to hike to the top, but she knew Kennecott had fenced it off. She sighed. Soon the hills would be covered in wild yellow snapdragons. She imagined them waving in the breeze and felt a heavy nostalgia, as if other generations had sighed with her. Reflections of still-denuded trees crossed her window, and she continued to stare at the northern end of the mountain range, even as it disappeared behind houses. The bad side of town, she thought. She felt herself come to the surface of her feelings, as if having been underwater. Her awareness focused on a radio news bulletin. The convicted murderer and leader of the Mahesh cult, George Doyle Lutz, had been denied parole for the second time by the State of Utah Board of Pardons and Parole. He was convicted in 1970 for the murders of Bruce Royal Bills, the property owner of the farm where the hippie commune had settled, and a cult follower, a drifter named Gary Alabama Mott. Several other cult members had served prison sentences tied to the murders and for various unrelated crimes. The trial had been overshadowed by the high-profile Manson family trials. The word Mahesh took on a sinister and mysterious hiss in Jenny's mind. She sat up and stretched, as if she'd been asleep. Traffic began to slow down. She watched brake lights come on all the way up the block. Red and blue emergency lights flickered in the distance. "Goodness, I should have turned when I had the chance," Mom said. "What's the Mahesh cult?" Jenny asked. "Oh, honey, you don't want to know about that." "Yes, I do." She stared at her mother until her mother rolled her eyes and asked, "Okay, do you know what a cult is?" "A small religious group." Mom lightly shrugged and looked up at the rearview mirror. "Sometimes that could be an old way of defining a cult. It doesn't have to be religious, at least in the way we think about religion. The world, this life, can be complex. Hard questions don't always have easy answers. We all want to be loved and accepted unconditionally, be a part of something. It's just human nature. Someone or a group of people might come along saying they have all the answers. It's easy for a vulnerable person to fall for an idea or a system of thinking that seems to explain everything. Do you know what I mean?" Jenny nodded her head. Terrible freedom, she thought. Challenged by her English teacher, she'd struggled through the Brothers Karamazov a few months ago, and the phrase terrible freedom jumped into her mind. Suddenly she understood it. Though she was interested, she focused her attention on the traffic being diverted along one lane of road. Mom continued, "A lot of times a charismatic person might come along. You know what charismatic means, don't you?" A car came into view. Its back end looked smashed, and it sat askew on the side of the road as if forcefully pushed over the curb. "A magnetic person," Mom said. "Someone who has an uncanny way of relating to and attracting others. They seem to have all the answers, and people tend to congregate around these types. Do you think a person can have all the answers?" "No," Jenny said. "I don't think anybody could." "You'd be surprised how many people aren't strong enough to recognize that one little fact. You have to think through things and never forget you're an individual, inherently free and good. I think the best answer to some of life's greatest questions lies in that truth. Nobody owns you. No society, no friends, no church, nothing. You're free to be anything you want to be. Some people struggle with that freedom. Sometimes, for whatever reason, they tend to feel alienated from the rest of the world, their family, their society, whatever that may be. Instead of drawing strength from their inherent freedom, they become lost and terrified. They look to others for answers to hard questions, others just as lost as they are. Then along comes a charismatic person, very confident in what they might say is the answer to everything. Pretty soon the weak or easily persuaded person gives themselves away, fails to take responsibility for themselves, surrenders to the charisma, cause, idea, religious devotion, whatever it might be. Giving up your freedom and identity is a dangerous thing. But people willingly do it all the time. They get what they think is unconditional love and acceptance, but they become isolated from the rest of society. They get pulled into a mentality to the point of total dependence. Their commune becomes their friends and family. They give up money, personal possessions. They're manipulated and pushed into terrible guilt for any deviation from the group. Sometimes it becomes nearly impossible for them to leave, to the point of psychological distress or even physical harm. A recipe for abuse, mental. She cleared her throat as if the next word were hard to say. Sexual. Her mother continued, "I heard a story about a young man, not even 18, who was exiled from a small religious cult, a polygamist group. His whole life was torn away from him. At the leader's behest, his parents rejected him, kicked him out of his house. His little sister supposedly told him he was going to hell, and she never wanted to see him again. You know what his crime was? He liked a teenage girl one of the adult polygamist leaders wanted to marry as a fifth wife." Mom cleared her throat, paused, then said, "He killed himself." A fire engine and a police car blocked the view beyond the crashed car. Little by little, Jenny was able to tell there were other vehicles involved, probably even a semi-truck, but she still couldn't get a good view. Mom clicked her tongue and shook her head. My goodness. She looked around as if frustrated by the traffic, then relaxed. "Looks like we'll be here a while." "So what was the Mahesh cult?" Jenny asked. "Well, I don't know everything about it, just what I'd heard on the news. They had a charismatic leader who promised a communal utopia. Do you know what? Yes, I know what communal utopia means." "Okay, well, they came in from someplace, probably California, and set up a commune outside a little mountain town northeast of Salt Lake. Their leader supposedly prophesied about the end of America. He wanted to bring about the apocalypse by ridding the world of religions and corporations. They'd planned on killing a lot of people, but someone let the cat out of the bag, and they were raided by the police. Apparently, they'd already started killing people. Be careful, honey. Sometimes a group mentality can be a dangerous thing. When someone comes around with a philosophy, like communism, for instance, that claims to explain everything, you could be coaxed into doing anything." "I doubt that," Jenny said. Mom's smile melted away as they passed the police officer directing traffic. Cars sat battered and tossed, as if a giant foot had punted through the whole block. "Don't look, honey," Mom said. Too late. Jenny saw a woman in an overturned car. A fireman laid a sheet over the mangled portion of the car exposed to the view of traffic. The sheet slipped away, and Jenny's breath caught in her throat. The woman seemed to stare Jenny in the eyes. Everything about her face said she was a living being, except her head was twisted the wrong way and pinned under the car door. An icy feeling exploded in Jenny's chest. When she finally took a breath, it was quick, followed by another. Her body became a heavy weight and refused to move. When the fireman secured the sheet with a heavy piece of debris, he walked quickly to where the other rescuers worked on a car, trying to free an unseen occupant. Jenny felt her own car pick up speed as it traveled through the intersection. In the distance, a beautiful red farmhouse with a pillared porch stood grandly among trees and horses. The canal reflected colors of the sky. Jenny felt her stomach turn, and her eyes seemed to close on their own. She'd seen her first dead person. "Jenny, honey, are you okay?" Mom patted her on the shoulder.